Hi everyone, welcome to another G2I community event. We're so excited to have you join us today. If this is your first event with G2I, just a little bit about us. We are a hiring community for engineers. We offer transparent interviews and a community for our engineers to connect with and learn together. We also do these community events with Thea, who's our community manager, to bring in experts and to share learning and to start conversations that we feel like are helpful and beneficial to the engineering community at large. My name is Michelle Bakels. I'm Program Director of Developer Health at G2I. One of our core priorities at G2I is the health and happiness of our engineers. So I get to have the very great job of working on initiatives to support such a good effort. Today, we're going to be talking about how to mentor remote software engineers, which we are definitely living in a world where we're more remote than ever. And so having great personal connections and being able to have great networking and help each other succeed in this kind of virtual environment is more important than ever. So we have this amazing panel today that we're going to hear from. We're going to have some questions that we've set up that we're going to ask, but I highly encourage everyone that is watching to participate in the chat. If there's anything that you hear any of us say that you want to add a thought to, or you want to like +1, or maybe you have a different take on it, we're going to be watching the chat the entire time. So we're going to be able to see those things and we can bring them up. And also at the end, we're going to have a Q&A with the audience. So throughout this entire panel, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat Q&A section. There's a little speech bubble with a question mark. If you're joining us on LinkedIn, feel free to leave your questions in the comments, and our community manager, Thea, will be moving them over here so that we're able to see those questions as well. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce briefly our panel before they introduce themselves. But our panelists today are Amit Verma, who's the CPTO at Flash.co. We have Dan DiGangi, who is a former engineering manager at DocuSign. Emma Burstow, Director of Developer Relations at Umbraco, and Rocio Montes, who's Senior Engineering Manager at GitHub Actions Compute. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I will start us off by just asking everyone to introduce themselves a little bit more and tell us a little bit about what your relationship is with mentoring, how you got into mentoring, and then we'll get into the discussion. So we'll start with Dan.
Hey everybody, my name is Dan DiGangi. I am a senior engineering manager. I forgot I'm getting older now. So I've been working in leadership positions for getting close to 6 years. I did a 20-year tour of duty engineering. Love JavaScript, like it's literally tattooed the logo on my leg, not a joke. And I am super into leadership and people management. The reason, my long story short, I actually did not have mentors when I was coming up as an engineer, and as much as I feel like I've had a successful career, it was tough, and it's very fulfilling and fun and enjoyable to help mentor and grow people. So I do it at my job with my teams. I do it on the side with engineers and managers. So it's something I'm just really into and hoping, I always hope that I can help bring, others success in whatever path they're trying to go down.
Hi everyone, my name is Rocio Montes. I am an engineering manager, like Michelle mentioned, at GitHub. Before that, I was at Intuit. And pretty much when I was at Intuit, it's where I started getting really involved in mentoring and community involvement. I'm definitely very active in women in tech groups, and I have led the open source hackathon for the Grace Hopper Conference, which is the biggest conference for women here in the US. And have led also tracks for selecting the white papers for the open source track as well. So very involved in all of this women in tech community. And that's where I guess all of my experience in mentorship started, because I started to mentor a lot of the young women engineers. And also as an engineer, as a woman engineer in this field, I know that it's very important to have a mentor and sponsors. So I'm very invested in that.
Hi everybody, this is Amit here. I am CPTO of Flash, an early stage startup in India, and I have around 20 years of experience in software development. Uh, Early part of my career, I worked in some of the large companies, but I think last 10 years I've been working in startups, and my exposure to mentoring started interestingly like 1.5 years back when I was catching up with my team doing their one-to-one. And what I realized was most of the questions, right, which I was discussing with everybody, it was very similar in nature. And that's when it occurred to me that, hey, looks like, these are the questions which not just my team actually are facing, but maybe, people outside also, like manager community or engineers at large might be facing. And that's when I kind of, I created a Google form. I kind of posted on LinkedIn asking people to discuss any topic they want, and that's how I started kind of this mentoring journey with people outside my org. So it has been very interesting journey, and I, as Dan mentioned, right, I wish I had somebody who could have mentored me early part of my career. So a lot of the learning that happened the hard way, it would have been like smoother for me. So yeah, so I'm here. Thank you.
I'm Emma Burstow, and I'm the Director of Developer Relations at Umbraco. I don't have a single tech tattoo yet, but now now it's with me. I have 10 years experience in this industry, and before that I was a high school teacher. So I've been an engineer, I'm now in developer relations, and I work with a very engaged, very vibrant community of people who are all over the world. And it's a really nice marriage of the time I spent working with teenagers and now with adults, and looking at learning, different learning styles, the way that people develop, the way that developers develop is incredibly interesting and important to me. And I was fortunate enough to have mentors as I was coming up in my career as a career switcher. It was I learned from many sources, and my mentoring relationships, both as a mentee and as a mentor, have taught me the most, hands down. So I'm very passionate about mentoring. I get to oversee some mentorship now. I get to still engage in mentorship. I have a mentor and I mentor people too. And that's, again, often around women in tech, but it can be, it's not specific just to this industry. There's also people in the wider world. So, yeah.
Thanks, guys. So a wide range of experiences, which will bring us to our very first question, which is about how relationships are formed between mentors and mentees. There's a lot of different things that you guys have there between, that you've done between workplace mentoring or community mentoring or programs that specifically match mentors to mentees versus kind of finding people organically through building in public, as they say, sharing the things that you're working on while you're working on them. So I wanted to ask you guys about, your thoughts on how relationships are formed. Good mentor and mentee relationships are formed in both directions. So I'll start with you, Dan, on this one.
Sure. So I think this is a particularly interesting question because, one, I wish I understood it better when I was coming up. When I was still engineering, I was didn't really have anyone, and I was more like trying to force things through when I would work. And you realize that without having some relationships, even beyond like the mentor and stuff, it's really hard to get things moving. And so when I start to think about like building these relationships in both directions, because one thing I'll say, here's what I'll say up front too, is I think a lot of people get stuck in the downward direction of mentoring, meaning like, I'm a boss and you're an engineer, but it goes in all directions. It can be up, down, horizontal. I think the horizontal is actually very undervalued personally. But when it comes to the relationship side, it's, you have to start with really one of the big things up front, time. Especially, people are all very different. They're dynamic. I have my style, you all have your styles. But in order to build those relationships, you have to get to know someone and understand what makes them tick, the levers, the knobs. And once you start to do that, you can start to actually craft like, how could I help this person? And hopefully that also can come back to you, because it's a mix, right? Is if I build a relationship with someone and I may be coaching them, it's also going to hopefully kind of bounce back to me and help me in my own way to grow. So I guess what I would say as maybe one last thing would be, you actually also have to care when you're trying to build a relationship. Like, I think that I felt at times some of my bosses or managers they were just going through the motions, but didn't really think of it as like, how do I get to know this person and what is it that they're really trying to achieve? So I guess that's actually technically the last thing. Is you always come into a new job and you're supposed to be in listening mode. When you're a manager or you work in leadership especially, you live in listening mode. You have to listen so that you can actually understand what the hell it is that you need to do to help someone out. And it's about them, not you.
I have to jump in because I could not agree more, Dan. Like, listening, that's a skill I learned late in life, I must say. Like, not waiting to impart advice, because you're a mentor and you're like, this person needs me, they need my input, I'm about to tell them the thing that is going to change their world. And actually what you need to do is listen, because so often in any relationship, but particularly with a mentor or mentee, you think you've got the solution, and you probably do have a solution for a problem or a situation, but unless you have a full understanding of the situation, that's not going to be very helpful. And having your ears open, and I really believe that in those early days of that relationship, your job as a mentor is to really have your ears open. It's to really listen. And then to set some goals around that, what is that person coming to you from? I love what you said about horizontal relationships, because actually that was something that I've been talking a lot about, because it's a funny hierarchy between mentor and mentee, but when you really are in that conversation with someone, you'll learn that there are things that they are going to teach you and things that you are going to teach them. And having your ears open really helps kind of get to the root of what those things could be.
One last thing just to throw in there too is the ability to adapt to different people is another really big piece of it. And so I forgot to say this in my intro, but I've worked at small companies all the way up to large, and I feel like I didn't have the full equation of understanding relationships. So I went to the big tech companies. So, I had this guy, really sharp engineer. If you all can't tell, I am the outgoing, overly energetic, optimistic guy, probably talks more than he should, which I'm okay with. I've accepted it and I'm practicing. I'm working on my own growth. But one of my guys, really, really sharp, like I said, but he is one of those very internalized processes, takes time, great pause before he speaks. And I really had to learn how to adjust my style to work with those different, so I could build those relationships effectively. And it probably took me a solid year before I really broke into it. But if you think about communication in general, what do you have to do, especially if you're, working, with the wider org? You have to adapt it, especially think about when we're coming from the technical side, right? And we have to go to non-technical, how much you adapt. That happens in every way in mentoring as well, because you may see a little Venn diagram action happening, across people. I think, Amit, you brought that up as, you saw these common things happening, but then there's those things that sit outside those circles, right? And it's how do we work to have that relationship so that we can make that work for them? And it's not always perfect. And I'll be honest, it doesn't always work, but our job is to continue to figure out is what do we need to pull on the levers and knobs so that we can figure out how to make that work for that type of person's style. Very, very difficult and very challenging, but fun problem to solve.
Yeah. And Rocio and Amit, you both have experience with mentoring in the workplace, specifically in that as a more formal setup as well. So I love the peer-to-peer mentoring and meeting people, but I'll start with Amit to talk about your experience with the more formal side of setting up a mentorship relationship. And then Rocio and I had a conversation before this panel today that was really interesting about mentoring between different like how should I put this? Not different age gaps, but like when you have like an engineering leader that's older than the person that reports to them, and that mentorship relationship when like it's not just the older person mentoring a younger person. So Amit, first I'd love to start with your experience in a formal workplace mentorship scenario, and then Rocio with expanding on your experience too.
Yeah, sure, Michelle. And taking it from Dan and Emma, right? See, so mentoring either at workplace or even outside, one thing which is very fundamental is the relationship which we build actually, which I think we discussed about it. So in my case, what I have realized is that that is the platform of any human interaction, right? So not just mentoring, otherwise also whatever interaction which we are doing, either remote or in person, if there is a level of trust, right, between the two persons who are kind of doing the interaction, the message lands differently, and it is much more effective, and right, and it kind of and it works the way it is expected to work. So that's where the effort which should go in developing the relationship is very important. Now, one thing which I have found from my experience is, again, with respect to, which is more applicable with respect to mentor and mentee kind of interaction, is because see, in this interaction, what typically happens is a mentee is is trying to talk about a problem, and sometimes when the problem is discussed in detail, it kind of brings out some of the flaws, shortcomings, some of the incompetencies of the mentees. So for that, the mentee needs to be a little bit comfortable about talking about it. So a mentor, right? So as a mentor, job is to kind of make sure that the mentee actually is comfortable doing that. And for that, a mentor also should kind of expose some kind of vulnerability from his or her side, and kind of, and they can be more transparent. So that is, so I kind of tend to spend some time doing that actually, so that the other person, the mentee, either in the company or outside, right, they are comfortable talking about some of the incompetency which they might have, which otherwise they would not be talking. That is one. And then the second thing is, not jumping into the solution actually. Like we as an engineers, right, we are kind of trained to solve a problem the moment we see it. But I think that style does not work here. We should actually ask the mentee go deeper, because mentee might start with some of the symptoms of the problem, which probably that is in the foreground of his awareness. But we have to take him to the deeper levels by asking questions, like and navigating him through to the right root cause, if you're able to do that. Because the idea is not to solve the problem, the idea is to get it solved by the mentee, because there's so much context to the problem, not just what is stated, like much beyond what is stated by the mentee. There's so much context to the problem which cannot be articulated also. So if the mentee himself or herself kind of comes up with a solution, of course with the guidance and right kind of probing and questioning, I think that works well. So that has been my experience, Michelle. Yeah.
Great. And I know, Michelle, you wanted me to chat about, forming mentor-mentee relationships with someone that, with engineers that are maybe older, than the mentor. And I have been in those situations where, I have been manager to engineers that are older than me. And one of the things that, I did was to really establish that relationship of respect and trust, and make it clear that I definitely respect the wider experience that they might have over me, right? Because there is all sorts of experience, knowledge that obviously comes with being more years on in the industry. So establishing that I respected their position, and I respected the career that they had so far, definitely set me up for success there. And really being candid about all of the either the feedback that I'm going to give to them, or the areas of growth that we are figuring out for that one person. But at the core, I think, is acknowledging that you have to start with respect for all those years of experience.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it was such a great point that you have brought up in our conversation too, because tech is an industry where young people come in so strong and advanced in their knowledge, and they can come into leadership roles very quickly, and so that this dynamic actually can occur quite often in the tech.
Right, especially as startups, right? I think we now I'm remembering we were talking about that because obviously startups right now start with you know, a group of 3 friends, and they're all like, you know, just right out of college, and all of a sudden they explode, and hey, you are a VP at 23 years of age, and which is amazing and such a great accomplishment. And then you start hiring more people, and you know, and it doesn't mean that a difference between, like, I don't know, like 20 or 30 years, right? It can be a 5-year difference, a 10-year difference, and you encounter these situations, and they're different, right? And we just have to get adjusted to them. But yeah, we see a lot of that in the industry nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. And Amit, you really started to answer the next topic that I wanted to go into, which would love, if you have anything to add to this, please do. But when it comes to being an effective mentor, you have to be able to give advice that is going to help people. But sometimes people don't even know how to ask for help because they don't even know. You don't know what you don't know, right? Like sometimes you don't even know what your options are, or you don't have a full understanding of the scenario that you're in to know what your routes are. So you talked about being an active listener. There's quite a bit of discussion already about being an active listener and about pausing before wanting to offer solutions, and instead ask more questions for discovery. But what else do you, and all of you have really, when we do these, I keep saying our previous conversations, we have these pre-panel conversations. Everybody had very good and different ways of figuring out how to get down to the needs of your mentee. So, I mean, if there's anything else that you want to add to that, and then I'd love to hear from everybody else their different strategies of understanding the needs or discovering the needs of a mentee.
Yeah, sure. But before that, I wanted to add to the point which Rocio was mentioning. I think, yeah, so which is like a mentee is older than the mentor, right? And how do you kind of deal with that situation? And so I think one thing I have learned, right, especially in the startup world, as Rocio was mentioning, that people who are very young, they can be very senior in the hierarchy. So one thing I kind of try to communicate, tell my team that, hey, so end of the day, let's not take the title very seriously. We are all problem solvers, right? So everybody in the company is kind of solving a certain kind of problem. The impact of the problem and the resources they have, that might be different, right, depending on where they stand in the organization. But end of the day, we have a problem, we have a goal, and we have to go about solving it with people, with our as an individual capacity. And if we have that kind of mindset, right, what happens is then you are like focused on the problem and the progress towards the solution. So that is one thing I wanted to add there. Actually, that helped me a lot actually, and I feel my team also has helped. Yeah, coming back to ISO, the question which you asked, Michelle. So you are right. I think I jumped into this answering this question. So I'll probably quickly reiterate that. See, the idea is so yeah. So two things actually. One is the mentee, right? They may not know actually, as you mentioned, right? They may not know what is lacking in them, or they might just know the problem at a surface level, the level at which that they have interacted. So as a mentor, right, who probably has experience in that area, you are expected to kind of guide that person, right? Guide the person in terms of uh, taking him to another level so that that person can ask a right question. I'll give you an example. For example, so I was having this session with one of my one of my manager, and not my manager, he was a manager from say any other company, right? And then we were having the session, and he posed the problem as, hey Amit, my team does not respect me. And that is how it started. And I said, why don't they respect you? And he said, no, I don't know, but whatever decision I take, they are not like, backing me up and things like that. Then I said that, when did it happen? And then he came back to one decision he took with respect to changing the process. And he kind of, he justifies his decision. He said that, hey, this is the change I brought in the team, which was very useful for the team. But after that, I realized their behavior changed. So again, I had the solution, but I asked the person himself that, with this particular knowledge that you applied a certain process change, right, and you lost some respect. Now you have this knowledge, right? Let's say if you have to again solve this problem, how do you do that? And he himself came up with the answer, which was not like, which was a little surprising also. He said that, if now I have to solve it, I'll probably go and ask my senior members of the team. I'll try to take the buy-in from some of the key people of the team. And then probably I'll deploy the solution with the entire team. So I said, great. So you have the solution now. So again, so some of the things which we can do is, guide them to the place where the root cause exists. And that is where our, mentorship experience would help. But that's about it. Yeah.
And I think, Michelle, when we were, one of the things that I, always think about when I'm trying to really get into the root of a problem is I compare that to how we do in tech root cause analysis. And we ask the 5 whys of an incident. So we're always like, okay, something failed, but why? But why did, like we go 5 levels down. And that's something that I always try to do when I'm trying to sort through a problem and really get to the root cause of something compared to what we do in incidents.
Rubber ducking came to mind really quickly with what you were saying there.
Yeah.
I think what I would expand on, you mentioned about questions. So I really drive on the questions, especially because there's like, I think there's 2 sides to it. If you think like very extremes, which is, there's like, this is me. I am like go, I know what I want, or I have a good idea. Here's what I'm looking for. And on the flip side, you have someone that either it's not caring, but just either doesn't know, or maybe needs to think through it, or maybe they don't really care. Some people are just there and doing their thing, although growth does need to keep going, in my opinion, always at some level. But like, I always like to start with very generic, non-leading things. So I'll be like, first week, set up one-on-ones with everybody, right? And then I just start with like, give me a 30,000 foot view about yourself. What have you been doing in dev? What do you like doing? I think the part that's really important when you have these conversations is, so you do need to stay in listening mode. But what's interesting is one, are your questions bringing out, things that you're learning about them, and they're actually help? Or is it that I have to figure out how to like dynamically fork off of what they're saying to try and ask it in another way, or to extend what I'm asking to try and really, I've had people like it's pulling teeth to get info out of them, and it's difficult, but everybody can get there at some point. But what I think is interesting is, so I have a way that I look at, for needs for someone. So generally, understanding somebody, like, what are you looking for, or figuring out with them what they're looking for. But there's 2 pieces of it that I add to it, which is, one is, what do I want for them? And this is coming from the place of my experience and understanding where they could go. Now, does that mean, no, don't do what you want? No, it's me offering my expertise that I think could be a path that they want to consider, or a couple of paths. But then the last one that I think gets missed is also, what is the company trying to do? So like, what is the direction, path, and goals we have? Because not every company can offer, or even yourself, what somebody may want. And that's a difficult position. I'm sure, let me know I'm not crazy if you all have run into this, where someone will come up. So like, I'm on the front end, back end side. Someone will be like, Dan, I want to be an ML AI person. And I'm like, I don't have the ability to offer that. Maybe I can find a mentor. Maybe there's opportunities in the org, but that happens a lot. So I think of it as like, I don't know, I have this weird affinity for triangles whenever I talk about what we do at some level. But I think that is an important one, to see those different sides of it when you are really understanding, but also what you can actually provide.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, because one of the things that I was thinking is that actually sometimes it's knowing that it's not a fit, and knowing that you can't provide mentorship in this case. Like, not sorry, there is no mentoring you, but actually perhaps you'll get there faster with somebody else, or perhaps somebody else has that specific set of skills, experiences that they can share with you. And you spoke about like when it's pulling teeth. And I think my biggest mistakes can be around being endlessly adaptable, when actually there's a good opportunity for me to pass somebody on to somebody else, or for me to rematch people. But I wasn't going to talk about that. I was going to talk about questions, because we've been speaking about questions and the kinds of questions that get answers. And open questions are always going to be our friend, but you don't want to go into the danger zone of just interrogating, right? And I think one of the things that I always underestimate is the power of some questions and then a pause, going to sleep on something and meeting again. And where Amit and Rocio as well were talking about, leading people somewhere and kind of getting them to solve their problems. And that's the joy, right? Is when you meet a week later and the person tells you, I solved my problem by doing A, B, and C. And you could have completely disempowered them by saying, go do A, B, and C. And a really good mentor will lead them to that and then walk away, not necessarily knowing if everything has gone in, and give people that opportunity to take some time to develop. And then the last thing I just want to say was about trust, because we talked about establishing trust, and it's definitely been alluded to, is the power of vulnerability in establishing trust. And it's when I've looked for the mentors, I've never wanted to work with a rock star. I wanted to work with a learner, with somebody who's a work in progress and knows how and why, because I see them as people that have the map. The rock stars are done, they're finished, great, good for them. But the people with the map I'm interested in, the people that are still curious. And that's what I aim to do somewhat when I'm talking to, or when I'm working with people, is to make sure that whilst I hold space for them and their stories, and I'm listening to them, I'm able to share enough of myself and the problems I encounter and the trouble that I have, so that they understand I'm not a rock star. It sounds weird saying it, but if people are looking to you as a mentor, then they might well think you are. So I like to make sure that people are aware that I struggle with things. Sometimes they're the same things that we're talking about here in this relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. That vulnerability and bringing that humanity to it, of not being perfect and being a work in progress yourself too. Dan, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I really like the work in progress. Like I think mid-level engineers are especially interesting, but I don't know if anyone's heard of Plateau. It's this like private mentoring site, and the reason I bring it up was I had a staff engineer come to me, and it was the first, and I've mentored staff engineer that level. If you're not familiar, it's like the highest level, unless like big tech, where they have distinguished engineer and principal. Anyways, I also like the rock stars because I think that they can also be very challenging as well. Because when you are at that level, that nth level is, how do you go forward? And a lot of places they're just like, oh no, you just go to management. No, they're not the same things. They are very, very different things, right? And I found that the staff side was one where I actually needed to get like coaching on, because trying to push someone, especially when we talked at the beginning, where they have more deep and wider experience than I do. I have a lot of years, but there's a reason that they're at that level. So I just like to say is I like to take those on too and figure out, how do you push someone? And if you're looking for more tactical, if you are mentoring those at a higher level, I think that what you have to look for to be tactical is what is the depth of the impact that they're making? Because what you find is when you're a junior engineer, I hate saying the word junior, I don't like that term, entry level or newer to the industry versus say staff, is you find that you live in your own little world when you start out coding. But staff, they have, or the higher you go, it's the width or the breadth and the depth of the impact that you make. And if you're not acting in that way as a staff, personally, my opinion is that is not what a staff engineer does if you're not making that. So that's one thing I look at very closely when I'm working with high level engineers.
Definitely some good points in there. And yeah, again, there's some things that Emma touched on, you touched on, that go into our next question, which we're going to start with Rocio on the answer for this. this is like the hard part of mentorship, because like mentee mentor relationship, it can be like this beautiful relationship, provide so many opportunities, access to like different levels of your career that you may not have even envisioned for yourself. There's so many wonderful things that come out of it. And a lot of times it feels like a conversation that's like, what should I do next? Or where should I go next? Or should I get the certification? I have been in this situation where I'll just say the advice that I needed was somebody to tell me that I was the problem, that there wasn't like a problem with leadership, or that there wasn't a problem with the organization, or that there wasn't, it's not that this thing that I wanted didn't exist. It was that my attitude towards something needed to change. And I was basically the person that was causing myself to have these problems on a team, which is a really hard conversation. And it can be really, really difficult for someone to hear that when they're searching for help and you're like, it's you. That's like a tough break. It's like the last thing you want to hear, because you already decided it's not you and you need the answer, but now it's got to come back to you. So how do you deliver tough advice to someone? Marcio, we'll start with you.
Right. Yeah. So I think like there are maybe 3 points that I would like to call out here. So the first one is that, you know, when you are giving hard advice, you have to be sympathetic, but like very firm, right? You have to come across clear with what exactly is the feedback, right? What is the problem that you as a mentor have identified, and what would be the desired outcome? You can massage it all you want, but you got to make sure that the message comes across, right? But the problem here, or the challenge, is that at the same time you want to be sympathetic, because you're not their manager. You're not, you know, you are here in a supporting position. So being sympathetic and understanding situations, and, you know, putting yourself in that person's shoes, definitely something that you have to take into account. So we gotta have we gotta find a balance there. And again, the message has to come across clearly so that there are no miscommunications. You know how they, for doctors, when they're going to give bad news, they actually make them, I think, say the actual word, like dead or died or something. Like I have heard of that, right? So obviously, no one's going to die in this situation in a mentorship relationship, right? But you have to be super clear, like Michelle, you were saying, right? I needed someone to tell me you're the problem. So it's not like, okay, well, you know, some of your attitudes or whatever. No, like if you have identified that, hey, Michelle, you are the problem here because of this behaviors. I would never say that you are actually the problem. It's the behaviors that are the problem, and the situations that, you know, come from those behaviors that are the problem. But you got to call it like it is, right? So be sympathetic but firm, and make sure that you are calling out clearly the desired outcome, right? And how to solve it. So then the second thing that I use is the feedback sandwich, in which you kind of like start with good feedback or something positive, and then you give the bad feedback, and then you finalize with something good as well, just to soften up the feedback that you gave, right? So you kind of like put two good things on the sides, and then something like the stronger feedback in the middle. And I always like that. And I even like, I don't always do that because of the person, but I do it because of myself, because I just feel bad that I'm calling things, you know, that are bad. So there's always good things to be said about someone and about a situation. So start with the positive, call out the positive, and then go into what's bad. And then the last thing that I always allow myself, and this is because of how I process information as well, and I'm like, hey, maybe other people process it as well. Whenever I get, so the third point is to ask for follow-up conversations, right? And I, you know, I say that to people when I'm giving hard feedback, because whenever I get bad feedback, it takes time for me to process. Like I might be there listening and hearing, and okay, I don't know, whatever bad news that I get, and I will be in my head, and then I like hear the first sentence and I don't hear anything after, right? It's just like I'm in my head. So I didn't process much of what you were saying, and I have so many questions, but I cannot form an opinion. I cannot form the questions. I cannot process anything. So I'm going to go back home or whatever. I'm going to process it all, and then I'm going to 10 questions that are about to come up. And if, you know, that person who gave me that feedback or had tough conversation didn't allow for that follow-up conversations or didn't set up that for me, then I'm be in an uncomfortable situation of having to reach out and ask. So I'm always, put another meeting in the calendar, put a follow-up conversation there so that people have time to process and we can talk about it again. So yeah, so be sympathetic but firm, use the feedback sandwich, and allow for follow-up conversations is pretty much my techniques.
I really like clarity, because one of the things I was thinking about when you were saying that, Rocio, is that they're hard conversations to have once. You don't want to have them twice. Make sure it sticks the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that that's something lately that I like to establish with mentees early, and I like to encourage other mentors to do the same, is that throughout the course of the relationship, I will need to tell you things you don't want to hear. Like, if you're asking me to mentor you, you're gonna, like, you're signing up for me to tell you the truth. And that's a balm, I think, to both of us. The idea that there will be hard feedback in the future, and if we're doing it right, there should be, right? If they knew all the answers, we wouldn't necessarily need to meet. So to have that kind of agreement in place, and then the way that I manage myself in those situations is by reminding myself that if I were the problem, I'd want to know. Like, it's a real kindness when somebody who you trust says to you, what you are doing, that is the problem here. Because there's a freedom in that, because then you have the choice to change. You can start going about your life and knowing that you have the options. It's not your workplace, it's not your leaders, etc., etc. It just doesn't feel good at the time. So I think establishing at the beginning that this is the way this is going to work, making sure it's clear, and making sure that both of you know that this is an empowering thing, to know that you have the ability to change this next thing.
Yeah, taking from what Emma said. So I've learned that negative feedback, right, or constructive feedback, it is more about the person from where it is coming than about the message actually. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that if somebody is giving me a constructive feedback and I have a very high level of trust, and we talked about the trust in other contexts, but here as well, if a very high level of trust, then the message actually lands with me actually, and I am more likely to kind of act on it, because other kind of prejudices and all don't play a role. But if I don't have that level of trust with the person from where it is coming, even if the message is right and all the data is behind it, still I'll probably not be likely to act on it. So that is one thing which so that is where now so the developing the trust plays a very crucial role here as well, when you are trying to provide a constructive feedback. And the second thing is, when you are within a company, right, when you are mentoring somebody within the company or within your org, it is important that it is not as a boss you are providing the feedback, all kinds of feedback. I kind of make it bi-directional. So very, like, once in a while, or depending on your frequency, you have your team also provide feedback to you, and you acknowledge it, and it is okay to say that, hey, yes, this was the feedback, I'm working on it, but probably I've not been able to do it. So you kind of tell them that we all are trying on something is succeeding for both of us, some things we are not able to, we will do it a little later. So that way the relatedness is there, the relationship is built a little stronger, and then when you provide a similar kind of feedback, probably it is going to land better. So yeah.
So I'm going to double down on a few things I heard and then add a few. So I think, Emma, you said it is, so one of the biggest parts of our jobs is setting expectations, managing expectations, and making sure they're clear. And so when I go into any type of relationship, whether they're my reporting to me or not, is what they can expect in these. And like, you have to be like, hey, like, you'll get advice here, or sorry, feedback here. But Amit, you added something really important, is we keep talking about trust. And one of the big ones, and I won't lie, this is literally in my onboarding intro deck when I started a place, is I want feedback too. If I'm doing an S-word job, I want you guys to tell me, because that, one, that builds trust. Two, it's that you're accepting of it too, that you're not perfect, that you want to grow, right? Like that is huge. And that helps establish that. Don't forget about the time factor. It does take time to build that. I do think one hard situation you may run into is, I don't know if anyone's ever gone into a place and it's on fire, or you have a low performing team or something. Sometimes you don't always have the relationship there right away, so you have to figure out is, how can I get someone to open up to, like, hey, you don't know me that well, but I need to give you this feedback, or as a team give you feedback so that we can get better, and that's a tough spot to be in. So another like nice like secret trick is, ask somebody if you can give them feedback. 98% of the time I'll just be like, hey, is it okay if I share some feedback? I've only had a couple of people ever say no, and the reason was that either they were in a bad spot personally, they were in a bad spot with their performance at work, or they were just having an off day. Sometimes you have to play off of that and just be like, what is what does this look like right now, and is this actually the right time to do that, right? Like, you really have to keep those things in mind. And then also, you do need to be clear, but you got to have a good delivery. Learn how to say things in the right ways. If I can make a suggestion for a book, read Crucial Conversations. Such a good book. Amazing way to learn about how to use your language and have the right conversations, adaptability. But those are some that pop up for me when it comes to that, around like advice and feedback.
Yes, love that. Love all of that advice. And Crucial Conversations is a great book. I think there's a companion book, Crucial Accountability. Yeah, and they're some of the top two like professional development books out there that I get recommended a lot. So there's 3 questions that we have in the audience Q&A, and I do have a fourth one kind of like loaded, but I'm going to push it towards the end, because we have about 15 minutes left. So for these questions, I'm just going to have one person answer each one. And if we have some extra time to expand at the end, we will, but I want to make sure that we can get all of these in. So the first one comes from Gabriel. And he asked a great question. It's possible that the mentor-mentee relationship ends up emerging naturally, right? Is it really necessary to officialize this? What are the differences between, oh, it just went away. Anyway, you can show the question again. Oh, wait, I found it and answered. Anyway, sorry. What are the differences between a mentor and a colleague with more experience sharing their knowledge? So like, the difference between like having an official mentor and then like just working with somebody who like tells you how to do things pretty well, I guess. I think, Dan, when we've done our pre-panel interview, you have like this huge array of different mentorship experiences, and some of them are very naturally emerging from like social media and stuff like that. So I would love for you to answer that question first.
Sure. One sec. Let me make sure I got everything in there. Yeah, so I've had a mix of organic, and then of course when you're management and leadership roles, that's implicit, in your response, or explicit in your responsibilities. So the way, a lot of times what I found is, I think that not even, I'll be honest, I'm not like someone that wants to be like an influencer or any of that kind of stuff. I like being out there producing things that help people. And what I think I found is that through mix of like credibility and quality of being out there and experience and stuff, I think people tend to sometimes just kind of organically come and ask. I think I get like 10 messages on Reddit every week or two, people asking. And it's honestly just putting yourself out there and showing, that you have experience, you can provide, value and help people grow. And then let me make sure this. So what are the differences between a mentor and a colleague with more experience sharing their knowledge? Trying to make sure I understand what that one is asking. Michelle,
I think if I were to hack it again, I would say like this is a situation in which you there's some senior professional either in your organization or in your community that constantly just kind of like jumps in and gives you advice. I'll just say like this is basically my most common experience with my mentors is that I'm just blubbering around in social media world and people just see what I'm doing and they're like, can I help you with this? And that can happen at work too. And then after some time of them constantly helping, I start to see them as a mentor. But yeah, there's like this time where it feels a little bit ambiguous. So like, what are the differences there? Like, does it need to be like so official?
Gotcha. I wonder, and I hope I'm hitting the nail with this as I'm thinking about it, is I think it's easy to jump to an assumption that if someone has more experience than you, that you can't offer them something. But I was thinking about when you go to interviews, and again, I'm old, so I've got a lot of experiences, but I still have situations that get asked of me where it's like, walk me through a situation where XYZ happened, but I don't always have every single one of them. And the way that you go at it is how would I handle based on my experiences? So even if I have someone with, say, significant more experience or that more aligned to whatever the thing is I can still think and give help and direction on how you could approach that situation. Like, yeah, there might be some factors and context because of your experience in the situation for sure, but that doesn't eliminate my ability to give something that can help again give that direction to help them be successful in whatever they're running into. I'll just say is just make sure you get give trust before give trust before you take it, give respect before you have to do those things. And once you do, even if someone knows they have more than experience, let's say, if you guys have that mutual respect relationship and understanding, people are going to be happy to have a conversation with whatever direction it needs to go.
Thanks for that, Dan. So the next question, I'm going to have Emma answer first. And it is, how do you establish a culture of accountability in your mentorship relationship?
Cool. Okay, so I think that's interesting because it ties in a little to the previous question too. One of the things that I was thinking, how when you make a mentoring relationship formal, you have the ability to establish roles, expectations. I mean, there's lots of very, very wonderful and productive mentor-mentee relationships that have never been given the name, that are very, very unofficial. I've enjoyed many of them myself. But with everything set out at the beginning, you've got the ability to know where it's going and what to expect from each other. And in terms of accountability, I think that's key too. So often, these kinds of relationships or meetings or engagements can be sidelined because they're not strictly the day job. I mean, in a context where you're the direct leader of somebody and the mentorship relationship has been formed that way, you're going to show up. But if you have a mentor or a mentee around the business and you're very busy and you go through busy periods, it's so easy to just push this to one side. And I think that one of the things that I make clear to anybody that I'm working with is that we need to be very, very respectful of the amount of time that goes into anything like this and each other's time. We keep appointments, we bring all the preparation, and we do whatever we need to outside. If there's, could you go away and look again at this, and so on and so on. I think the most if that's not possible, if it's not possible to have that culture of accountability, then it's likely that you won't both be getting very much from the relationship, and that's when it's a good time to call it. So yeah, I would say that we must treat these engagements like we would treat the quarterly business meeting that we give extra special priority to. And yeah, I think that's one of the joys of formalizing the relationships. You get an opportunity to set out those expectations early.
It's very important for, the clarity of the relationship and what is going to come out of it. There's a third question. I actually have my one loaded question, remember. So this next question I'll ask Rocio, and then my loaded question in the background I'll ask Amit after this. But so this next audience Q&A question though, how would you approach mentoring senior engineers who are experiencing a plateau in their professional growth?
Where plateau can come from, many different aspects, whether it's because of a technology that, people have been using for so long, lack of motivation, lack of desire to work on the product that you're working on. So really, we would need to drill down into what exactly is plateau and what does it mean to be plateau to that person specifically. And once we get to what exactly is it that they're feeling or why they think they're plateau, try and find, that desired outcome. What do they want out of their career? What do they want in the next 5 years? Do they still have any aspirations, right? Like, where do they want to be? Where would they like to be in the next 3, 5, in the next year? Although now in tech, I think like long term means like within the next year, especially with how fast we're moving, right? So we're not longer talking about long term is like 5 years. No, long term is like, okay, where do you want to be in the next 6 months? But yeah, understanding one, what exactly is plateau about their career, what aspect, and then from there, understand where would they want to get, and have a plan to work towards that. But I feel that a lot of us can get into that when we have been for so long, either at a company or at a team or working with the same system. But you know, sometimes change is difficult to get or difficult to achieve, but maybe it's something that we all need from time to time, right? I guess without knowing the exact details, there's just so many aspects that plateau can mean. So again, ask the 5 questions to really get to the bottom of it.
There you go, back to the 5 questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that perspective too, because it's like, yeah, the asking, okay, I've hit a plateau in my career. What makes you feel like this is a plateau? It's a
What
really good
exactly
question.
is that?
Amit, I want to ask you a question. What is your biggest lesson learned on being a good mentor to someone? What's the thing that you felt like you grew the most when you understood?
Sorry, can you repeat the second part? I could not hear properly.
What is something that you felt helped you grow the most once you understood it about being a good mentor? I'll add this to the chat too. Biggest lesson learned on being a good mentor.
Yes, yes. No, yeah. No, I think very interesting question. I think there's so many lessons I have learned, which I hope is helping me become a better mentor every year. But I think if you ask me what the biggest lesson uh, it's not just common sense actually. To as is the case with other things in life, other skills in life. Mentoring also is a skill. It's not just about communication. There's a lot of nuances that go inside it because we are really trying to help the other person grow, and it depends on so many things, like what has been the past experience of the person, what is his level of understanding, what is that person's worldview, what is that person's capability, right? So all these factors play a role in actually helping that person succeed or achieve whatever they are discussing with you. So there are nuances to it, and then there are some best practices around it. So there are like a lot of books. I think Dan mentioned a book. So like that, you have to kind of learn some of the good books, and based on your experience, you also get the feedback right from your experience, your observation, what is working, what is not working, and you kind of create a framework of what works, what does not work. So my biggest lesson is that is like little abstract. The second part, I think, the little bit more tangible would be which I think everybody has mentioned, listening actually. So listen a lot actually, because as you listen is when you get to know the layout of the problem, which may not come to you in a very nice prepared manner at the first interaction itself. So be ready for it. So I think these are the couple of top 2 lessons I think I learned.
Thank you for sharing that. We have just one more minute to make our closing remarks for the end of this panel. But really quickly, I wanted to give everybody just a couple of seconds to share one quick last final thought if they have something that they want to add to this conversation. Any last detail you want to leave us with? And we'll actually go reverse order: Amit, Rocio, Emma, Dan.
Sure. So let's let's not do let's not get into mentoring, right? Or let's not interact with the mentor just for the sake of doing it. Understand that this is a source of knowledge which would help you grow actually. And because the world outside is changing at a very fast pace, technology is changing at a fast pace. So this new source of knowledge, which would come from somebody experienced, would probably be required. I feel it will be more required with in these times. So that is one last thought, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so if I would like all of you to leave with one thing really, is that you as a mentor really have to listen and to, you know, be there for that person in whatever regards that they need you to be, right? Don't bring in your personal bias, don't bring in your personal experiences, because sometimes you're like, oh, I went through that and this is how I solve it and this is what you should do. You know, however you did it might not work for that person. You can for sure, and I do, you know, bring some of the things that help me and in like, you know, put them in the framework of how you want to help the whoever you are mentoring, but don't expect that they are going to work for them all the time. So just be open to how each person likes to be mentored.
Mine would be that the mentor will get more out of the relationship than they expect to, particularly if it's their first time mentoring. It is definitely not a one-way street. This happens two-way. No two people emerge from a relationship like that unchanged. We always change and grow through it.
I have a million in my head, but I think one that was really powerful and impactful for me was learning that. So we were talking earlier about like not coming off in a negative light. Switching from something like a negative mindset to a growth mindset is very powerful. And the broader of that is reframing things in different views and perspectives is a very powerful technique that you can use. And sometimes even the worst things, just looking at it differently and reframing can be a huge help and help in you as an engineer or you as a mentor, whatever you are. And also, shameless plug, I got laid off recently, so if anyone has an engineering manager role open, let me know.
I love it. Go for it. Yeah, please. But yeah, I encourage everyone to connect with everyone on this panel. Connect with Dan, Emma, Rocio, Amit on LinkedIn, and follow them because they're great people. They have great advice. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our G2I community session on how to mentor engineers remotely. My name is Michelle Bakels. Again, I'm Program Director of Developer Health for G2I, which is a community hiring platform. If you need developers, if you're trying to build your engineering teams, please reach out to us. This whole episode is going to be available immediately on YouTube, so feel free to go check it out there. And then you will see our master marketing genius, Maybelline, chop this up into little bits and be sharing those on our socials. So keep an eye out for all of that goodness. But thanks so much, everyone, again, for your time and everyone who came and joined us and participated in the conversation, asked questions. This was great. And then Thea added in, also, this recording will be available on the same link. So you already got the link. There we go. Way to make that easy for us, Thea. So thank you, everyone, again, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.